Sorry.
Take your attention and let it be in your heart center, right behind the breastbone. Now follow your breath as it goes in through the nose, all the way down to the belly button, turns around and goes back out. What time we got right now?
12:15.
Okay, I'm going to try and cover a huge amount of ground in 45 minutes. So relax, just take it in. We're going to put it up on YouTube. We're going to start off with 100,000 years of human history. The first human adventure was a specialization called the priest healer. Monkeys, cows, they all got bosses, mothers, but only humans have priest healers. And it's been found in every society that's ever been investigated. And you're all doing that. It's been so specialized and cut up and made technical in this day and age that sometimes we forget the essence of what we're up to. The priest healer forms a communion, literally, an energy union with his patient who has got some kind of block in his connection with the divine, however you want to conceive of it. And in this communion, you're like a jumper cable where you and the patient form a complete circuit, and the mysterious energy that we call love is the healing force, and usually things get a little better. What each society calls the names or makes up for a technical procedure varies tremendously, but the communion, the trust in the priest healer, and the healing are the same in all cultures. And so you're doing that. Now, second big topic. We're in the middle of a tremendous revolution in human consciousness, probably the biggest one in 40,000 years. About 40,000 years ago, there was a mutation producing what we call the Cro-Magnon man. He wiped out the Neanderthals, who were a nicer bunch of guys, but they were kind of clueless. The kind of man that existed predominantly after that was able to focus his consciousness, strategically look for threats, defend against them. He lived by making tribes with us and them. These tribes were always organized top down. They usually hallucinated a big boss in the sky. Don't ask questions, just obey orders. And they delegated it to either the king or the pope or somebody like that. Obey orders, stay in line. And if you didn't stay in line with these hierarchical, male-dominated authoritarian societies, you would be tortured, murdered, imprisoned, certainly punished. These little societies always said, we are the chosen people, and them, the other guys, we can rape their women, take their stuff, and enslave their children. And this was the history of mankind for about 40,000 years. During this time, those who were called mentally ill were considered possessed by demons, somehow morally incompetent, or just strange. They would often be driven out into the wilderness, beaten, tortured, put in various kinds of prisons. You either conformed, or maybe you'd get sent to the priest healer to be shaped up, and if you didn't shape up to what was considered okay for that particular tribe, you're in a lot of trouble. Starting around the Renaissance, about 1600 years ago, but really picking up speed about 240 years ago, around 1780, there has been a revolution in human consciousness where all violence has decreased dramatically. The numbers of wars, the numbers of casualties per 100,000, the amount of murders, the amount of torture of children, which used to be routine, torture of prisoners, abuse of spouses, decline of slavery, the end of the Inquisition. The last person was burned in the Inquisition in 1816. The idea that women were actually people rather than possessions and property. That children are people with rights rather than yours to do what you want with. The whole idea that you can't beat children is very, so like, there's been this new thing that empowers individual people, gives each one of us authority rather than having authority reside in the tribe, however big that tribe was. The bigger the tribe got, incidentally, the lower the violence. So far so good. Now, the rise of what we call psychiatry and psychotherapy is part of this big dramatic change in human consciousness. It only came up in the middle of the 18th century. If you read the ancient accounts from the Salpêtrière in Paris or Bethlehem in England, that's where the word bedlam comes from. Like it's only in the middle of the 19th century that it was the novel idea that you could do something with these people. And all the psychotherapy and taking care of individual strange people, like the autistic kids and stuff, it's really new. So far that's good news. However, and this is where the story gets personal, in 1970 I was a professor in medical school. I was the youngest one ever. People thought I was 60 because I'd done so much. And I was part of a little study group where we were studying the future. And I read a book called The Limits to Growth, which is commissioned by a group called the Club of Rome, 100 leading European intellectuals and businessmen. Jay Forrester, the best computer scientists at MIT, put it together. And what the Limits to Growth said was, if by the year 2000 we don't go from an expanding to a steady state species, which means zero population growth, recycling all non-renewable resources, not any further degrading land that we can grow food on, and not further polluting our environment. These are the big variables they put in the computer. We go into overshoot and collapse mode, which means that if we exceed the carrying capacity of the globe, we so defile it that we can't even maintain the 7 billion people we got now. Billions of people are going to die in the next 100 or so years. Really horrible deaths, because there's not enough food, water, clean air to support them. So I really freaked out when I read this book. I bought 500 copies, gave it to everybody I knew, developed a kind of PTSD. The responses to the books I gave out to all my friends, colleagues, professors and stuff was devastating. 90% of the people said, what do computers know? The other 10%, usually my old hippie friends, said, oh wow man, I gotta get an island and some guns. I said, you don't understand. The next year was the peak of my career. I wrote my own copy of this called Balancing Man on Finite Earth. Gave out 10,000 copies wherever I went in the country to speak. Again, the same devastating response. When I was writing this, it was like in a trance for 2 weeks. And it came to me that there's no political or economic solution. That the expansion of the species is because of how our mind is wired. To have us, them, top dog, bottom dog hierarchies, and sexual segregation into men, women so strong. And that the only solution to change the mind was to become more conscious. That only through a more conscious humanity would we preserve ourselves from a really horrible couple hundred years. And this is what took me into meditation, because there were a few masters who said, we're at this incredible juncture and there are no political or economic beginning solutions, that it's only through individual elevation of consciousness that a critical mass of aware human beings will come, that they'll make the right choices and they won't kill each other. Fast forward to 1976. I've been meditating for about 5 years by now. I find my master, who's an enlightened teacher named Osho, who used to be called Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. I'm in India. I meet him for the first time. I look at him, he looks at me. I burst into tears and laughter. I feel like I've known him forever. I crawl across the floor, I touch his foot. He says, come closer, Bodhicitta. My spiritual name is Swami Anand Bodhicitta. Touch the other foot, I've been waiting for you. So I touch his foot, he touches me here like that. And there are 3 explosions of light, literally inside me. I can feel it. And in that second, I knew that whatever I thought I was like a postage stamp on a huge envelope. That whatever I thought was love was a thimbleful in the ocean, and that it was all over forever. Forever. There's just a few more details to finish off. So I look up at him through the tears. He says, how long you have come for? And I said, the state of New York, the government of India, and my family all think 4 weeks. But if you've any other ideas, let me know, and I'll take care of the details. So he laughs, and he says, now neither the family, nor the state, nor the government have any control over you. You're serving a higher power. Then he says, have you done any groups in the West? I said, I did all the groups in the West. He laughs again. He says, and this is important for you guys, anybody who in any way is doing psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, group work, Gestalt, is doing my work. They bring up a thirst that only I can satisfy. And then he says, how long are you here for? I said, you tell me. And he says, eat me, drink me, breathe me, nourish yourself. You're part of my family. That was 40 years ago. It's just been getting better and better and weirder since. Now, this is my introducing myself to you at a different level. I'm here for anybody who needs me, clinically or personally. It's absolutely unaggressive. I rely on your initiative. As far as clinical skills are concerned, I've done everything in psychiatry. I've seen 20,000 patients, inpatient and outpatient. I work literally cradle to grave. My biggest specialty is the Bardo teachings, which are the Tibetan guidance about how to die consciously or get a good rebirth if you don't die consciously. I teach workshops on that all around the world. I was empowered by the Tibetans 30 years ago. I received the teachings and was told I could transmit them. My main thing in psychiatry was family therapy. I ran the best family therapy training program. My biggest teacher was a guy named Carl Whitaker, who you may or may not have heard of. And he taught me especially how to do co-therapy with people. So when I'm moving over here in July 5th, July 5th, I'll be available a couple hours a day for any kind of consultation, whether it's folks across the street or here. You can book a family for me to see with you or come talk to me about any kind of situation. I'll give you the best I can. This leads to the next big topic in this kind of big study, which is what is the mind and human communication and how does it really work? My experience and understanding is that there's a huge field of energies vibrating. Many of them haven't even been named or scientifically perceived yet. That each one of us is like a node in this incredible network. Things happen. If you're really conscious, you can actually be aware of what's happening. But it happens whether you're aware of it or not. If you're a little more developed, you can actually create a thought about what you're aware of. But the thought is never the thing itself. The map is not the territory. And then on top of thoughts, you can create a poetry that we call language, which describes a much more complex and varying network of thoughts, which are yet an abstraction from what's actually happening. What really got me into this was around 1970. I was doing research with a group at Bronx State, where we would look at movies and videos of people living their lives in their houses and psychotherapy sessions. We would look, and these were taken at 48 frames a second, some of them at 96. And we would look at them thousands of times. And what we found is that when people are in communication with each other, everybody beats, literally at 48 beats a second, we synchronize. And then, on top of this, if you put 2 psychotherapy sessions up, one in week 1 and one in week 5, and you look at them like a dance, you find that people make postural shifts at exactly the same time. One at 10 minutes, one at 20 minutes. It's the same program for every session. That every human encounter has either 3 or 4 phases. The 4th phase is up. The first phase is an exploration of differences, and then there is a moment where everybody shows their palms, which is the communion. And then after that, they go on to prefigure or to enact what the real business of the session is after they've worked out where they are with each other. My specialty was greeting rituals. We made a movie of a big birthday party where about 100 people were, and I could see that within the 3 to 20 second greeting, people immediately signaled their dominance, deference status to each other, how intimate they were, and then prefigured what was going to happen for the rest of the encounter. That we let each other know immediately where we're going. So we then came to see some of these same synchronies and symmetries in various kinds of animal communications. And this is there's no place for this because most of our theories are still based on thought first and then action. The idea that thought is a frosting on the cake and is optional really blows most theories of materialist mental functioning, which is what the current fashion is, out the window. So, my sense is we live in an amazingly synchronous, mysterious universe. The real work with the patients happens, and then we talk about it after it happens. And if you think about your own lives, about everything you know, a really loving therapist or loving parent can get away with almost anything. It's not the technique of parenting, it's the intention. And I feel that's pretty much the case with therapy too. That if your heart's in the right place and you're conscious enough, you know what to do. Next. All the traditional spiritual teachings. Does everybody know the Four Noble Truths? Buddha. The first is that there is suffering. The second is that suffering is because of desire. The third is that the end of it is there is a cessation to desire, and that the way to do this is the Eightfold Path. Well, the tricky thing is there is also in each of us an urge that's not a desire, a force that wants to become one with God or the divine or nirvana. You know, there are different languages depending on where you come from. But we're not accidental beings only with desire. We're just a poof. So the art of life and of therapy is to find out what's the nature of each person. You know, what is their particular design that this urge is coming through. And like in the old song, accentuate the positive, and at the same time, help them to see that their desires go no place. Whether you get rich or you stay poor, whether you get the food or you don't get the food, desires don't go anywhere. So that's the art of our trade, is to find out, and there are different words for it. You know, like with the autistic kids and the whole neurotypical, it's basically, what's this person's nature? What do they want to manifest? What do you and you want to, you know, how do you know what's really authentic for you and what's just the same old desire? And that's where meditation comes in, is that the more aware you are, the more you can tune into yourself and know whether something really turns you on or just exhausts you. And I can be somewhat helpful for that, but it's more like an artwork and a dance to try and help you find it, whether it's in a case or in yourself. There's no book for it. It's absolutely not one size fits all. And how are we doing on time?
20 minutes.
Okay, I think it's enough big topics that if anybody has any questions, I'll attempt to respond to them.
But I don't want to be on camera. I can ask my question.
Experiences that things happen. Then, while it's happening, you can actually be aware of what's happening or not. A thought about what you're aware of is still a third level up. And then to be able to put words on your thoughts is even beyond that. Like, do you ever get a feeling in your gut, oh, this is scary or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a thought before you had that feeling?
No, it was more of a reaction to the event.
Yeah.
Thought about it later.
Right,
Okay.
that's how it is.
How would you incorporate Chomsky's work on language and language development in that concept?
That's brilliant about the deep structure of language, but language is still meta. It's still a level up from the event itself.
So, Chomsky said that language develops to give meaning to something that we intrinsically know, right? That language is a developmental thing that came with our cerebral cortex, and that by labeling something, we infuse it with meaning, right? So if you look at the Charles River, that's probably what he was looking at. We know this is this thing that's flowing, and it's a different object every second because the river is flowing. But by naming it the Charles River, we all have a collective understanding of the concept. That's the Charles River, right? And so when we learn emotional development, because he bridged this to emotional development, by learning these sort of labels, right, give us this collective understanding of what sad is, what sad is. And I think in a way it parallels what you're saying, except with more of a sort of global sort of way we do it, collective.
I've been,
group consciousness about.
Well, like Jung's collective unconsciousness.
I've been in 40 countries. I've either done medicine or taught meditation on 5 continents. I've never been any place I couldn't connect with people and love them. And I always knew whether that person was available or whether I should get out of the way. You know, most of the places I didn't speak the language.
Okay, so feedback. Give us your feedback.
Yeah. As I became more meditative, I could sense, I'm not sure if I read minds or how tune in and stuff, but like I'd been this was in 1992. I'd been a disciple since 1976, and I was leading a month-long group in Japan. And I remember the occasion, this guy sitting in front of me who I've never met, talking in a language that not only do I not understand the words, but I don't understand the gestures, because Japanese language, this means yes, and stuff like that. And I find myself saying something to him about his whole life, and he bursts into tears, says something to the interpreter, and she says to me, he wants to know how you knew that was exactly what he wanted. And then I realized I tuned in enough that there's a level that's available to all of us where you'll know what somebody needs, what they mean. You don't have to go through checklists or charts or think about it. You know.
Wouldn't you say that that's an aspirational place? I aspire to know, to be able to tune into that there are many steps up the mountain, many different paths, and that sometimes people need form to get to non-form?
I see it more as a capability that's been overlain with garbage. Like, all of you who've been mothers, the mothers know, if they're any good, what the baby needs, where it's at. They don't have to think about it. It's letting go of the conditioning, the expectations, the habits that we have of each other to get tuned in. And on the other side, the person has to be open enough to let you in. So it's not, the doing is all negative in the sense of letting go of the blocks rather than the learning. Yeah.
Sounds like intuition, right?
Yeah.
But it's still a skill that's developed and developed as a skill. It's not like
Right.
you
Don't
might
automatically
have
have.
a predisposition to have more intuition that is kind of honed in your experience, or in your experience it's reinforced, you know?
That gets big. That gets to the other big topic, which is who are we? My experience is that this particular model is going to be discarded and there'll be a new one. That whatever we are is here for many, many, many lives. That all we take from life A to life B is how evolved our consciousness has become. That it's like if you get to 25, that's where you start the next birth. You don't take your money, you don't take your relationships, you don't take your knowledge. But whatever this thing is that we call level of evolution, that's where you start off. So like, this relates to your question too, that one of my enlightened teachers in an off moment said, we don't tell this to the beginners, but it takes an average of 200 successive human births before you start to realize, hey, there's gotta be some way out of here. I'm tired of doing this over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And he says, and then it takes an average of 8 births as a meditator to finish the job. So it's not a quick trip. And because of the nature of what this guy is, I've tracked lots of people, both family, friends, and other disciples and patients for between 75 and at least 10 years, you know, I really watch what happens. And there's especially a group of about 40 people who I lived with in the Himalayas for about 30 years under ideal circumstances, like the 30 of us living in a commune with an enlightened teacher who's trying to shape us up all the time. And we change slowly. So it's made me very relaxed and humble about what kind of pressure to put on patients, friends, or family. My experience is each of us has a nature that you're born with this time. You can't change it. It's like the grin on the Cheshire Cat. It'll get fainter and fainter as you become more and more conscious, but you never stop being what your nature is. That all attempts to make yourself into something else are a waste of time and energy. That the trick is to find out what's your nature and to let it happen. And that it's more of a relaxation and a non-doing than an effort. So, thank you for reminding me of that, because that's really important. Each one of you is perfect the way you are. Just relax and let that one manifest. Don't try and be anybody else.
So suppose you find yourself to be an Al Capone.
Be gesund. Perfection. Perfection.
No, really.
What to do?
Is that a good person?
If you become more aware, it is self-correcting. This is one of the mysteries of awareness. That somehow anything done with awareness self-corrects. I don't know how that works, but I've seen it and heard it from the enlightened teachers. That unlike the basic Judeo-Christian teaching of follow the 10 Commandments, do the right thing, you're born in original sin and you have to, struggle with yourself to perfect all life. It says, relax, watch, it will self-correct and get better and better.
And if you resist the process in terms of let's say, not, I'm always wondering why obviously I have time to meditate, but I don't do it. Have you come across any people like that?
Well, my strongest case is my sister, who I've been trying to get to meditate for 45 years and who strenuously resists.
So what's the resistance of that?
It's a mystery to me why any of our patients or friends change or stay stuck. I really don't know. This has been one of the questions that I've had, is what is it that actually triggers change? Sometimes it seems to be a disaster in life. That
When you
for
meditate,
me,
when you meditate, do you need to take any physical posture? Can you meditate lying down, sitting? Does it make a difference?
anything done with awareness is meditation. Anything done totally is meditation. That's the attraction of extreme sports, of anything dangerous, because you have to be so totally into it that you're there. All
So,
you're talking about the kind of stereotype, basically Buddhist sitting meditation,
No, more difficult in terms of, let's say, that Tara Brach will tell you, Tara Brach will tell you
Yeah.
to sit down a certain way, keep your back up, sit high, and that you'll go into, a meditation.
She's giving basic 2,500-year-old Vipassana Buddhist instructions. It doesn't work for most people these days. It was designed for a different kind of person. Modern man is so much in his head that we have a huge amount of repressed conflict in there that needs to be literally cathartic. You have to get the energy back in the whole body and get rid of the stuff before that kind of meditation can start to happen.
Do you have to get rid of it, or you just have to live with it? Or accept
It, with the cathartic exercises, that's why people really get off on rock concerts in the mosh pit, because you get rid of your crap. So at least you feel good for a little while.
But
Notice I did not
if one
finish.
encourages only negative energy, for
Hmm?
example, the classic synopsis of punching a pillar when you're angry. If we were looking to develop more empathy for ourselves and for our emotions, why not, I'm borrowing, treat ourselves like an infant? When an infant is angry or upset, do we yell, do we scream? No, we coddle, we hold, we speak kindly. So perhaps we hold our emotions in that way, with loving kindness, in a sense of, okay, I'm feeling upset, so I need to hold my anger like an infant. Or I'm sad, I need to hold my sadness like an infant and take care of it. So I don't necessarily think cathartic has to be explosive. If we channel it through a more nurturing, empathetic for our own emotions and for people who are with emotions, that is another way to look at
There are many kinds of catharsis besides that particular
Right,
explosive
right.
one. Like, my favorite one for most people is to get music that they can dance to for a half hour.
Mhm.
Whatever comes in the dance, whether it's sadness or joy or rage, just
Right.
dance it out.
It's very.
That works almost. It
All
looks
right.
like we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Surprise!